Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time, and I'm here today to talk about how I made cold cannon using my dehydrated potatoes, dehydrated meat, and a few other ingredients. Now, not everything I used in this particular one was dehydrated, but a lot of items were. But if you want to use all dried ingredients, yes, you can. So the great thing about cold cannon, it is a traditional Irish dish that is very, very inexpensive. And it can consist of only three things: mashed potatoes, cabbage, and then if you want, onions. And then garlic is a really great option to add in there. So how fancy and involved you make it is entirely up to you. Sometimes keeping it very simple can be the best way to go. And I do have an old video I did when I first started my channel on making cold cannon, and I had originally learned about it from Cat's Cradle, who, her channel's still out there, but she's not doing videos anymore. If she does, they're incredibly rare. And we immediately fell in love with this recipe. And anyway, I told people I promised I was going to share how I did it using the dehydrated mashed potatoes. So these are potatoes from my own garden that I cooked, mashed, and then dehydrated, and then powdered up. And the thing I like about that is that I've already got the potatoes peeled and ready to go. All I got to do is cook them a little bit in some kind of liquid. So that can be using just plain water, but in this case I did use some chicken bone broth because earlier in the week I had baked up a chicken. Patrick ate on it the first night, then I used a lot of the meat to make some other dishes out of, and then cooked the bones for 3 days so that I could then have a nice bone broth to use in making this right away. Now, you can also use your dehydrated bone broth, be it chicken, turkey, beef, whatever it is. And I have a video out on how I've been dehydrating bone broth, and I leave the fat in there and everything. And I love it. So unless I'm going to use it up right away like I did in this case, it gets dehydrated because it makes it easy to use. So in that case, you would follow the same idea if you're using the bone broth as I'm doing here, except for you use plain water and throw in however much of your dehydrated bone broth that you want. So what I did in this case I wanted to make a big enough batch so Patrick could have enough to last him a few days, because the days I'm watching the babies can sometimes be a little chaotic and I don't want to have to worry about making dinner on those days. I used the 6 whole cups of the bone broth. I started off, because that's actually what I had. I actually had 6 cups altogether. I started off with the 4 cups and then added to that 1 cup of the mashed potato powder. And I have experimented with it quite a bit, but I still wanted to kind of watch it and see how well it thickened up with just the 4 cups. But because I was also using a few other dried ingredients, such as the meat, which was 1 cup, actually better, I only meant to use a cup, but you can see here, I used more than a cup, which is part of the reason why the cold cannon took on such a dark color, was I went a little crazy, poured in too much of the elk burger that I had dehydrated up back in 2020, and I went a little crazy with my mixed greens blend. Usually I just put in a big size pinch. This time I put in like a whole 1/4 cup, and it did darken the whole thing, but we got a lot of good nutrients in there. But I'll talk about that in a minute. So when I'm getting started on the potatoes, that's what I did first, was I got the potatoes started cooking, because they're not like your instant potatoes you buy in the store. These do need a little bit more time to cook. Think of it more as like a malto meal. When you cook that, you got to let it cook a little longer. So I cooked the dried beef, the potatoes, and all the other dried ingredients, spices and herbs that I threw in there all together in with the bone broth. And then as I've seen it thicken up, I kept adding more broth. Now, if you end up using up all your broth and you realize it's still too thick, just add a little bit of water in there as you go. The bone broth was only for the purpose of adding more flavor and nutrients to the cold cannon. So you don't have to use broth, plain water is fine. And then on the side, while the potatoes were cooking, I went ahead then, since I was using fresh onions and cabbage and garlic, I went ahead and got those sauteing on the side in my bigger cast iron skillet. And in that case, I used about a half. It was a good sized cabbage. I would say it was about that big. And so I used half of a cabbage. However much you want to use is up to you. But for this amount, I found the half seemed to be a pretty good, it worked out to be pretty good. You can use more or less. If it's a smaller cabbage, you might want to use the whole thing. Just chop it up and put it in there. I used a little bit of refined coconut oil, and I did go ahead and pour some of the bone broth in there too, so it could cook into the vegetables as well. And then I used one whole red onion. The red onion was probably about that big, chopped it up. And then a handful of garlic, because we like garlic. So I put in quite a few garlic cloves. You can put in less if you want. I don't know, I might have put in as much as 10 because we like garlic. And so those all got sauteed in the pan together. And then once everything was nicely cooked, then I just mixed it all together and then kept it warm. It's really that simple. And then of course I did add a little bit of salt. So if your broth doesn't have any salt in it, you might want to add about a teaspoon of salt. And then some recommended herbs you can add or leave out would be thyme or sage. I would say start with a teaspoon, add more if you want. And then black pepper or even red pepper flakes is another one of my favorites to use in the cold cannon from time to time. This time I just kept it simple. I just did salt and pepper. You know, however much you want to add, again, is up to you. Keep it as simple or as complicated as you want. Now, let's just say all of your ingredients were dehydrated, including the cabbage, because yes, you can dehydrate cabbage and use it that way. I can't tell you, since I've never actually used it in this kind of thing, I can't tell you how much you would need to use. Maybe a half cup of the dried cabbage, and you're going to have to play it by ear because I don't use measurements when I do stuff like that. I just start throwing stuff in. But however much you decide to use, you're going to want to increase the water ratio that you're adding in there with the potatoes, and then you can just cook everything together. That makes it even easier. So you put your dried cabbage, your dried meat, your dried potatoes, your mixed greens if you're going to add them, your spices, your herbs, your dried onions and dried garlic, all in the same pan with your liquid, be it water or broth, and let it cook together. And if it looks like it's getting too thick and it still needs to cook up and absorb more liquid, just keep adding more liquid a little bit at a time as you need it. It's that simple. So if you want more information about dehydrated foods, whether it be ones you purchase or you dry yourself and how to use them, I'll link you back to my most recent video where I give you a bunch more ideas in the description box down below, but this was more focused on this particular one dish meal. Now you could do the same thing if you don't want to use maybe a ground elk or ground beef, but you like those chicken sausages, the little sliced ones. You could throw those in there too. Again, you would have to throw them in with the liquid as it's cooking the potatoes and more. So anything is dried, just cook it all together because it's all going to end up together anyway. So anyway, go check out that older video where I was using more fresh ingredients, the just made mashed potatoes and so on the cold cannon, as well as the dehydrating videos and anything else like the dehydrating meat, how to dehydrate your ground meats. And I'll put in the mixed greens blend video and whatever else I think applies, and the broth video, so you can learn how to do those if you don't already. And then learn how to just be creative and make up your own meals, soups, and so on based off of those. Any thoughts, ideas, tips you would like to add, go ahead and put those in comments down below. And thanks for watching. Take care and God bless.